Charlie was considering the problem. Claire asked impatiently, "How are you and Dad? Do you have any clues?" "Ah." Charlie looked at the pile of skewers and beer in front of him, and said against his will, "We are still looking up the mahjong halls, and we have no clues for the time being." Claire sighed and said, "Then you continue to search for her, and Elsa and I will continue to look for her as well." "Yeah." Charlie said hurriedly, "Don't worry, Dad and I will work hard to find." "Okay." Claire said, "Then I'll hang up and communicate if there is anything in time." "No problem." Charlie hung up the phone, and Jacob was already appetizing. He drank a glass of beer, poured another glass for Charlie, and said while eating the skewers, "Good son-in-law, no one is going to bother us today. Let's have a good drink. Come, let's go first." Charlie was funny in his heart. Elaine was not there, and the old master was relieved. He nodded and said, "You should drink less. Drinking too much is not good for your health." Jacob laughed and said, "People are refreshed at happy events. I am looking forward to your mother being admitted by the MLM organization. Anyway, if she goes in and suffer a bit, she can't die. She will be stuck for 3 or 5 years. Yes, let us have a birthday in a few years." Charlie nodded and sighed, "I think it's good too, but I'm afraid she won't accept it at first." Jacob sighed, "That's right. At first, this child is filial, too filial. The key is silly filial piety. Is it your mother's kind of person? Is she worthy of such filial piety? You have no blood relationship with her. You yourself say, if your mother is like this, are you still filial to her?" Charlie was a bit embarrassed and a bit melancholic and said, "If my mother is still alive, even if her temperament is worse than the mother-in-law, I will be 100 willing." "That's true." Jacob said embarrassedly, "I'm sorry, Dad shouldn't mention this, just use it as an analogy. You see, the grandmother of Claire, and the mother's temperament are basically the same. To be honest, they are two shrews, one older and the other younger." Having said that, Jacob drank a glass of wine and said seriously, "So you see that I am not filial. My mother can't do things. I won't let her live in my house when she is on the street." "Why? You can't say that because it was your mother, you protected her when she killed you?" Charlie nodded, "You are right." Jacob sighed and said, "Actually, your life is much better than mine. If you marry a good child like Claire, even if you are not successful anymore, she will not divorce you. If you are like me, marry a B*TCH, then your days are terrible." Seeing Jacob's melancholy look, Charlie couldn't help but feel a bit of sympathy. This old master's life was really not easy. He had a sweet first love, and he had a good relationship with his first girlfriend, but Elaine gave it to him. Cut her out, how miserable it is. At this time, Charlie deliberately asked, "Dad, tell me the story of your first lover? Last time your classmates' reunion, I listened to a few uncles chatting, and it seemed to be quite legendary. What's the legend?" Jacob lamented, and said, "I and Mei Ching were getting married before graduation. It was difficult to go abroad at the time, but her family has something to do. They could send us to the United States for further studies. I plan to have a happy event after graduation, and then go to the United States for graduate studies together." Speaking of this, Jacob said angrily, "Who would have thought that when I graduated and everyone was partying, I would have AFC King drink? When I woke up, your mother-in-law and I had already." "Hey!" Jacob covered his face and said, "Elaine, this woman is also very scheming. She told Mei Ching about this at the time. She was so angry with Mei Ching. Similarly, a B*TCH like Elaine likes to be noisy. Mei Ching directly wrote me a parting letter, then packed up and went to the United States by herself. I have never seen her since." Charlie asked curiously, "You didn't explain to her then?" "How to explain?" Jacob said, "No matter how you explain it, Elaine and I had actually done that. Mei has a cleanliness, life is clean, and emotions are also clean. She also knows that I was drunk and designed by Elaine. But she felt that she could no longer accept me like that, so she broke up with me without hesitation and went to the United States. Charlie deliberately asked him, "Then do you still think of her in your heart?" Jacob also opened the chatterbox, and said with emotion, "I think, how can I not? She is the first woman in my life, and the only woman I have ever loved, otherwise I would not change the phone password to her birthday." Charlie nodded with understanding, and then asked, "Then have you inquired about her current situation?" "I've inquired about," Jacob said, "but I can't find out anything. In the past few years, I only heard that she married an American and gave birth to a son. It is said that the family conditions are very good, but there is nothing more detailed. People know, after all, our old classmates didn't have much contact with her, and we immediately broke contact with our classmates." Charlie nodded lightly, and thought to himself, if Mei knew that Jacob had become like this now, I guess she wouldn't feel the same way back then. Jacob saw that Charlie had not drunk at this time, and said with some dissatisfaction, "Good son-in-law, why don't you drink 2 glasses? Just let me drink it alone." Charlie smiled and picked up the wine, and said, Come, have a drink with you." Just after speaking, Jacob's cell phone rang suddenly. The phone showed an unfamiliar number, and he couldn't help frowning. "That's it, who will call me?" After speaking, he subconsciously pressed to answer. A woman's gentle voice came from the other end of the phone, and she asked tentatively, "Excuse me, is this Jacob?"